I.S.U.P.K. Oh, and West. Babylon is falling to rise no more again. Babylon is falling. Freedom is here, my friend, not just part of the nation. YAHANNA never come bring peace in start of the vision. Now put your trust in the riches and wealth, guns are ammunition. Just the last statutes and commandments, we make the decision to keep them with precision. Just part of the nation. Daniel get a vision, him see the black Christ, it wasn't a white depiction. No allegiance to Rome nor its regions, come out them religion if you want be a free man. Cause the deacons them full of demons, same situation with Rasta with Islam. Only beacon of hope for your lean on is I.S.U.P.K and the General YAHANNA. Every fowl of the ear, every beast of the field, every creeping thing we creep on land, every mouth of the clear, loud and clear. YAHANNA is a black man who has ear, let him hear. Time to prepare, spiritually separate from Babylon. We no weak, we no fear, we no tear. Bun Saddam, my bun Batty man are just part of the nation. YAHANNA never come bring peace in start of the vision. Now put your trust in the riches and wealth, guns are ammunition. Just the last statutes and commandments, we make the decision to keep them with precision. Just part of the nation, send evils and curses on the whole city and the beasts and all churches. America fall, them deserve it. Rome get defeat, history repeat, another first days. Hey, 400 years they work with, then desert with, then turn round and call we worthless. But now the COVID lurking, them hurting, and then the doctors and nurses. Hey, one day to a building of a turn after the long journey. No care much money you a earn if you still want Babylon burn. One day to a building of a turn after the long journey. No care much money you a earn. Hey, I just part of the nation. YAHANNA never come bring peace in start of the vision. No put your trust in the riches and wealth, guns are ammunition. Just the last statutes and commandments, we make the decision to keep them with precision. Just part of the mission.
Yeah. I want West. Taking over. Aha. Yo, Nayata.
Yo, Gucci.
Strap to the bone, chat to me chrome. Fire one in a them head, shot to the dome. Them boy they no bad, that's how me know. Only bad when the man friend pop pill alone. Tall rifle a roll under me clothes. One West a run road that a fi be known. Brown in bad bitch, not silicone. Rich badness, fat belly phone. Them boy they not ready for the gun life. Give them a pitchfork and a grum knife. Press the chip clock on the front line. If the road dark, he become bright. Me dog them a killer when a sunlight. We was a transform when it turn night. Chris Kalish cuff we black and white. With the red light on the front eye. Toppy show. Tap about things where you nothing do. Toppy show. Kel taking a me and that a no fi show. Rifle bind them big like puppy toe. A tall rifle a mat we be go fi four. Toppy show. Batty boy stop chat where the fuck you know. Thing them ram up in a skin them. Time you get lead poison in an infection. Make your dopey rise quicker than inflation. And the high cost a living in bed from its inception. That's how the thing been tan. Start off slow, now the thing get strong. I want West and it never take long. Now we a do the road mad injection. Toppy show. Tap about things where you no fi know. Toppy show. Kel taking a me and that a no fi show. Rifle bind them big like puppy toe. A tall rifle a mat we be go fi four. Toppy show. Batty boy stop chat where the fuck you know. Them boy they not ready for the gun life. Give them a pitchfork and a grum knife. Press the chip clock on the front line. If the road dark he become bright. Me dog them a killer when a sunlight. We was a transform when it turn night. Chris Kalish cuff we black and white. Make the rain fall and the room dry.
brothers and sisters, man. If you like what you hear, hit the subscribe button, man. Subscribe to this channel. And also, please, go to isupk.com and pay your tithe. Drop me some cash so we can move around this planet like we need to, man, and do the things we need to do.
They're one West. They're one West. They're one West. They're...
Hey, Shalom, Yahweh Bashim, Shabbarakatam, to all the brothers, Yahweh Shemal, Athan Bashim, Yahushai, to all the sisters. I'm Priest and Officer 500 Barak Yala with the I.S.U.P.K, which stands for the Israelite School of Universal and Practical Knowledge, started out of 1 West 125th Street, Harlem, New York, under Commandant John YAHANNA, you understand? And we're back again every Sunday evening with the history classes. We're going to do a part 2 of last history class, right, which is Montreal Black Den. Because we don't hear nothing about the history of black people in Montreal, whether it's from post, during slavery, or pre-slavery, or during slavery, or post-slavery, as a matter of fact, right? So last time we seen a couple prominent black people in Montreal, some of them who are actually Judites. This is for the FBA community out here. Y'all are idiots to reject brothers like Drake. Not only is Drake the son of a brother from Memphis, but a lot of black people in Canada are so-called Black Americans, you know, who moved there during slavery and after slavery. So really to say that these black Canadians have nothing to do with Black America is dumb as hell. Y'all just showing how uneducated you are. You really sound stupid to just reject your own people. And the whole foundational Black American movement, you're going to find out that it was founded by a Caucasian woman. And it just creates further division within our people. Not only are we already divided more than enough, right? Obviously, I'm being sarcastic. We're already divided and it's bad already, where so-called blacks, Latinos, and natives are divided amongst themselves. And you add to the division with that idiotic movement of foundational Black American. Now, come to find out, a lot of black people in Canada are so-called Black Americans who fled from slavery or who established themselves after slavery in Canada, right? So about to share, go back to the PowerPoint. Make sure y'all click to the sign in and the sign out links, which I will post in the chat just now. That's Officer Adiyar joining us in a few seconds as well. But let me share my screen with the PowerPoint. Let's pick back up from where we left. And we're live on I.S.U.P.K Montreal, Toronto, La Pura Neta, and I.S.U.P.K I.T. So lucky that's not it. There you go. So this is where we left off last time, right? We had the history of Charlotte, who basically Shalom, so Yabasha Shabrakata.
Hey, Shalom, Priest Yahweh Shabbat. What's going on?
I take the while about the one about to get into the history class, right? Of a lot of black people they don't talk about in Montreal. Now basically paved the city, right? From Caesar John Knott, which is the brother I was referring to earlier. You know, we're gonna make a black Canadian whiskey called the CJ, and just like they have Uncle Nearest or Jack Daniels, which was the slave master of Uncle Nearest, Nearest Green, right? In Canada, we had Caesar John Knott, who was not only how you call it? Not only was he he was a free black man during slavery in Canada, right? He knew the craft of distilling, which is making liquor, and he was running one of the first businesses in Canada. He was a manager. Imagine that. And he made money. That's what people don't talk about. People don't talk about him. There's no businesses after him. There's not one bottle of whiskey named after him. You know, this nigga, he was getting the loot. After being freed from slavery, Caesar, his master, gave him 50 pounds and he flipped all the money. You understand? But nobody's talking about that, and you would never have known about Caesar Joe or not, you know, CJ, if it wasn't for the I.S.U.P.K. under Commandant General YAHANNA. You understand? But let's get into it. I forgot to show you last time an advertisement in the newspaper of Montreal. So there it is, right? The first one, the second one is the same as the other three. It says for sale, but in French. So we had advertisement in the newspaper in Montreal for slaves for sale and rewards for runaway slaves. That's that slide I forgot to show you last time. But there you go. This was in the newspaper in Montreal. If you can see, the third one says for sale. And right here, it's written in tiny. It says Montreal, 18 January 1798. Which shows you that, yes, slavery was very prevalent in the city of Montreal. As a matter of fact, we had the biggest slave market in Canada. Right? But let's get into it. Get into the class. It's going to read about the King of France. It's not talking about literally the King of France, but this one is interesting. Why I like this one, because it would show you that one of the bridges, one of the famous bridges in the city of Montreal, is named after a slave master. As a matter of fact, one of the subway stations, two of the subway stations are named after slave masters. They don't tell you that though. It's like a, let me get the slide. So it says the Papineau name is sacred here. The name of Prince is not. But we'll get to that in a minute. At the turn of this century, if you followed the news, you'd have seen how prickly people could be about it in Quebec's Place Names Commission decided to rename the Papineau-Leblanc Bridge over to Laval. In the face of the outcry, the commission backed down, and 2 months later, the old name was back. The Papineau name at least must remain. The president of Patriotic Société Saint-Jean-Baptiste de Montréal had insisted in a piece he wrote in the Toronto Globe and Mail. Leblanc, the name of a Laval pioneer, might go. He seemed to imply, but removing the Papineau part was like wiping out the memory of one of this province's proudest names. Quebec has, also others familiar with it, they have a motto in Quebec is saying on every single license plate says, Je me souviens, meaning I remember.
God.
Erasing the name Papineau, it's like wiping out the memory of one of province's proudest names. Guess what? Papineau was a slave master. They're not. It seemed like they forgot to remember to mention it. You understand? It's a lot here. The name Papineau is very important in our history. I bet. He wrote, the father and son are interchangeable in our collective memory. The bridge, built in 1968 to 69, and along Papineau Avenue, running up to it from clear across town, were named after the father Joseph, a notary and sometime politician. His son, the career politician Louis Joseph, is much better known because of his leadership of the Patriot Party right up to the rebellions of 1837 to 1838, roughly 3 or 4 years after slavery was officially abolished in Canada. In Quebec's collective memory, he's a star and a bright one. Almost our Ogiasefo, as President Kwame of Ghana was known, almost our redeemer. There's an old Quebec expression, la tête à Papineau, meaning Papineau's head, meaning you're bright. As people sometimes say about a dim bulb, ce n'est pas la tête à Papineau, meaning he's no Einstein. So he's considered a smart guy. Papineau Avenue and its bridge are not named after Louis Joseph for all his brightness and fame, but after his father, for the simple reason that he owned the land at the south end of the street in 1810 when it was given the name. After the rebellions with Louis Joseph, a wanted man, listen, white people just have a history of being criminals. Even after they own everything, they still got to be criminals. It's crazy. The authorities wiped the Papineau name off of the map and called the street Victoria for the Queen. It didn't matter to them that the street had been named for the father, not the son. They made no distinction as the names were interchangeable to them. A few years it took for heads to cool and the Papineau name returned. Prince still had nothing named after him, but we're coming to that. We'll see who's that prince that they're talking about, right? About the father, the day his son was born, he had him baptized at Notre Dame Church. The priest he got to do the job and also to be the godfather to his boy was the slave-holding Louis Payet, not one of the singular Sulpician priests at Notre Dame, but a backwoods reverend who always kept a slave or two. For those who missed the class about slavery in Canada, slavery was not, how you could say, explicit to a certain group in Canada. Everybody had slaves, from military personnel to the church. Matter of fact, a church run by the nuns, I think it's what is it? What's the church again? I forgot. Some Christian institution in Montreal was the institution with the most slaves. Right, out of all the religious institutions in Canada, they were the one with the most slaves in Canada. I think it's Hotel Dieu or something like that. I forgot exactly. You could just go on I.S.U.P.K. Toronto and Montreal, look for the class about slavery in Canada. You'll see that even the religious institutions had slaves. The military personnel, the poorest white man could have a slave. That's a lie to teach you that it was too expensive for just anyone to own slaves. Just like today, you could get a loan. Back in the days, you could have loaned a slave and paid back over time. That's nothing new, right? But just to show you that even the church had slaves. Whether it's the backwood reverend or the biggest church in Montreal, they all had slaves. You understand? So the bridge was named after the father, Papineau, who had his son baptized by a slaveholder. You're going to find out that the father himself was a slave owner. Good night. And this is who they deemed their redeemer. So like to be blessed at birth by a buyer and seller of bodies and souls, good night, and saddled with him as your spiritual minder wasn't the most promising start in life for freedom's coming champion. More like a curse. At this point, if that's what they consider a curse, I mean, doesn't that mean that all white people would be cursed at the time? If not most of them? I'm just making an observation, but who am I? I'm not the smartest person. I just know shit, right? It gets worse. On September 15th, 1792, Louis Joseph's father, who was elected that summer to the very first Legislative Assembly of Lower Canada as one of two members for the county of Montreal, bought himself a slave. So you mean to tell me that the redeemer of the French Canadians, of the Quebecers, of the Montrealers is a slave owner? What a way to set the example for Quebec. And like we just said, on the license plate, it says, Je me souviens, meaning I remember. Why are they not teaching this in school? That Papineau, that Joseph Papineau, who's the bridge name is after, was a slave owner. They're not teaching you that. Now we're gonna get to who was his slave. Prince was a steal at 300 livres, which is roughly 12 pounds and 10 shillings. Prince was the slave of Louis Joseph Papineau's father. That's who Prince is. But they're not telling you that. This probably had to do with his age. He was about 54. Maybe also with the fact that Joseph Benoit de Livernois, the Montreal tailor who sold Prince to Papineau, was going through a nasty breakup with his wife, trying to do her out of her share of the property. Being a notary, Papineau knew how crucial it was to nail down his property title, so no one could deny that every bit of Prince was his. So he knows that he has to make sure that on paper, It doesn't matter. This good, because we're considered goods, belongs to him. It was no secret. He had to make sure, yeah, I could prove it that I own this man, or this 3/5 of a man. I own. He is my property. Imagine that at 54 years old, you couldn't even listen. The tailor who sold Prince to Papineau could have just said, "Listen, this man's 54 years old. Why not? Why not free him? It don't matter if you were 95 years old. You were still being sold." Our oppressor never had compassion for you. It's a lucky. And of course, that one, if you want to chime in at any moment, yeah.
God, no sweat, no sweat.
So he made sure he got the full ownership record, the way you might do if you are buying a used car. Good night. See, you compare to a used vehicle. You understand? And as a notary, you know that it was on record, it was on paper. Damn, he probably stamped the proof of purchase. The savior of Quebec. But they'll never teach you that in high school. How do I know? Because I went to high school in Quebec. You never heard about him owning any slaves. Matter of fact, being the notary for the purchase of his own slave, where he made sure, yeah, I own him. Every single bit, from the hair on the top of his head to the nail on his toe, I own him. Damn. All the sales slips going back to when Prince was imported told a tale. Livernois had bought Prince on May 31st, 1787 from a distiller, John Lagorde, who had bought him on December 18, 1786 from Elisha Yeoman, who had bought him 6 days earlier from Martin McEvoy of St. John, who had bought him a month before on November 15 from Elisha Fullman of Walpole, New Hampshire. Papineau had himself an ironclad chain of titles there. So he had you see, when you pass down a car or listen, a firearm, you could trace back the previous owners. You could trace back from the first time this man was damn near on a slave ship. You understand? He had all the records to the last, which was his. His son, Louis Joseph, was about to turn 6. He was a bright boy, I bet. So what did he make of Prince? Maybe then or maybe later, as he preached liberty up and down the land, an old black shadow crossed his mind. Who could tell in all the reams of stuff written about the Papineaus, there is not a word about Prince. Y'all look up the Papineau history. We're going to go over the Papineau history on another class, right? Preaching about liberty and freedom. What about the slave that your father owned? You want to talk about liberty? Listen, our oppressor is a hypocrite. That's why we call him the devil. The devil, not because, we want to portray him as an evil entity or being, but the devil meaning deceiver. He's a hypocrite. You want to talk about preaching about liberty up and down the land? But what about Prince, the slave that your father bought and owned? And he made sure he owned every single piece of him. What about his liberty? What about his freedom? You understand? It's a lock here. When slavery was close to extinction, getting snuffed out by the courts, Joseph Papineau filed 2 petitions in the assembly to try to keep it alive. And you want to talk about freedom and liberty? Yeah, your father, just like many others, for example, what was his name? I think it's John McGill, the founder of the McGill University, which is the Harvard of Canada. They fought to keep slavery alive. And this is another lie about Canada, right? Besides the fact that they will never admit that slavery existed, when you prove them wrong and they do, you know what they're going to say? They're going to say, well, it was under the British. Come to find out, most slave owners in Canada were French Canadians. Not only did they fought to have slavery legal under a decree from King Louis the 15th, if I'm not mistaken. Could have been the 14th, but the 15th continued along after his father, right? Who cares? They fought to have slavery. And when slavery was about to be abolished, they fought to keep their slaves. You had, when slavery was about to be abolished in Canada, you had 3 groups. Really, it's more like 2. You had those who opposed slavery, those who wanted to keep slavery alive, and those who didn't care, who claimed they didn't care, they just wanted to keep the status quo. For those who know what the status quo is to keep the actual situation just the way it is. The way it is that slavery is alive, and that's it. So you claim to be neither against nor for, but you want to keep the status quo, meaning you want to keep slavery alive. And status quo is just being a hypocrite, really. Now coming back to that, Joseph Papineau not only was a slave owner, but he made sure he wanted to keep slavery alive. He didn't want slavery to go anywhere. His slave is damn near about to give up the ghost. He said, I don't give a damn if you give up the ghost or not. Slavery needs to be alive. Oh, Professor, it's the devil the Bible speaks of. Salakia. Help. He pleaded as slavery's mouthpiece in the spring of 1799, and again a year later. Pass a law, do something. The judges are letting the slaves go, robbing the owners blind. Imagine that. And you know, Salakia, when you know what's crazy is that when we talk about slavery, or we talk about the atrocity that's been done to us, what did it tell us? Stop playing the victim. That's victim mentality. Isn't this victim mentality right here? Complaining that the slave owners are being robbed blind? The judges are letting the slaves go? White people have slave mentality, are the only people who have a victim mentality. They're not the victims, and they're the first one to cry wolf. They cry wolf, they cry somebody punched them in the face when they committed atrocious acts across the face of the earth. Then they want to complain, well, people are racist in India, they don't like white people. Oh, apparently Africans are racist. The Arabs don't like white people. Y'all are bombing them to the Stone Age, and you want to talk about you're complaining that white people are being disliked across the face of the earth. Y'all committed a genocide on the Aborigines of Australia. You want to talk about them not being too fond of Caucasians? Imagine that. Y'all have true victim mentality because y'all are the assailant, and then you want to complain like you're being assaulted.
So like a priest, if I may, they're like rape when we didn't even rape them.
Good night. Imagine that. Imagine, to put it in better perspective, you see people have a problem to understand. This is white people, right? Imagine a sexual abuser abusing his victim and then turning around when justice is about to be brought and saying that it is the victim's fault, that truly he is the victim, and then turning around and telling the actual victim, well, get over it. Stop playing the victim. The aggressor is the true victim. Imagine that. Well, that example is perfect. That fits the description of Caucasian people as a whole. The Jewish man plays the victim and cries all the time about World War II. They're the one who started. You understand? The Americans want to cry about terrorism and whatever the case is. You know, then they start the war with Vietnam, and then they lost. They went to war in Afghanistan under pretense that the Afghanis had weapons of mass destruction. They went to war for 20 years, then they lost. You're not looking for weapons of mass destruction. How you look for weapons of mass destruction? A lot of casualties are kids and women. How's that? Talking about you fighting for the freedom of your country. How are you fighting for the freedom when you're the invader of a country that you invaded? White people truly have victim mentality. That's a proof right here. Read that again. He pleaded as slavery's mouthpiece in the spring of 1799, And again a year later, saying, pass a law, do something. The judges are letting the slaves go, robbing the owners blind. People not only in the southern US wanted to keep slavery alive, but throughout Canada as well. Throughout Canada, throughout the Americas and the Caribbean islands. They fought to have slavery. They fought to keep it alive. It's a lie. Or as he grumbled about slaves in August 1800, given the lack of means in this province for safeguarding this kind of property, it is considered precarious and uncertain. He's like, damn, we know. He's seen the decline, like, yo, we're about to lose our slaves. Good night. He wrote that on an inventory of the property of Michel Eustace Gaspard Alain Chartier de Lobtinière, yeah, that sounds about right, which he drawn up, giving the value of each item. It was to explain why no value was set down for Pompée Lobtinière's last slave. His other slave, Harry, he'd sacked the year before. Why? Because you can't really put a value. Okay, as a notary, right? He's assessing the value of this devil's goods. One of the goods was a slave. You can't put a value on something that is not considered, a good no more, or an item. Now it's a human. You can't put value on human life. He was basically saying, yeah, we're about to lose our slaves, so ain't no point of me putting like a value as far as, for example, to put in perspective as far as like, what do they call it? Insurance. Because you're not going to be insured for human life anymore. At the time, of course, right? A while back, the author of a sketch of his life wrote that from the works of the great thinkers of his day, Joseph Papineau had picked up liberal notions. For those who talk about, well, the conservatives of the race are the racists, he's a liberal. Trying to keep slavery alive. It's just like in the US, you have the Republicans and the Democrats. It's the same. Those are two wings on the same bird. Just keep that in mind. Thus, he brought before the Assembly a petition from the electors of Montreal to abolish slavery. The practice of it is not widespread, but it does exist, which is a lie. Slavery was widespread throughout Canada. Papineau finds it abhorrent that men can be bought and sold like cattle, proof of the humanity of this Cooper's son, seminary educated, stoutly Catholic who cannot abide the idea of human bondage. He is horrified that high officials in the judiciary and members of the assembly and of religious orders are slave owners. Again, our oppressor is the devil. He's a liar and a hypocrite. He sees that fighting to keep slavery alive is a losing battle. So he's like, you know what? I'm going to just join the winning team. Not that he cares about slavery. He doesn't have a moral compass. But he's seeing that, you know what? It is inevitable that slavery will be abolished. So let me not be on the losing end and keep buying slaves that are just going to be a waste of money, because they're not going to be slaves no more in a couple of years. That's really it. He didn't care. Listen, nowhere until then where he preached about, yeah, let me change my mind about slavery. When did it say that he freed his slave? You understand? He was just another racist and another slave master. This is the bridge that connects Montreal to Laval, which is just like pretty much an extension of Montreal. That's named after the slave master. And yes, Prince, was the king of France. That's what they call him. They dubbed him the king of France because at the time Canada was New France, right? But he's not literally the king of France. About that bridge, now that we've come to it, we will have to cross it. It doesn't take La Tête de Papineau to see a way. Make it the Prince Papineau Bridge and put a plaque explaining the name and its place in our collective memory. Do it on some October 7th, Louis-Joseph Papineau christening day, and lift that curse. That, you understand, you're basically saying, why not name the bridge after Papineau and his slave? let's not forget about that. They named it in the memory of the father of Louis-Joseph Papineau, right? Because he was considered the savior of French Canadians. Well, if it's in his memory, let's remember that he was a slave owner, that he bought an old man at 54 years old. He could, he could have said, let me buy your freedom. But guess what? The Bible says you'll be sold a slave and no man shall buy you, meaning free you. He didn't free his slave. Nowhere, even when they claimed to have changed his mind and be against slavery, which he wasn't, he still did not free his slave. Salakia. Of course, I'm going to chime in at any moment, right? So this one is about Joseph Pearson. So the silence of the Montreal papers on the murder of Joseph Pearson was something else. Nothing like the moment of silence that honors the dead. And we'll see why. Because nobody cares about black people. That's why. In March 1815, the Courant, the Gazette, and the Herald could chatter on about the war just ended with the United States, or what Napoleon was up to in France, or some joker going around stealing door knockers, but they never breathed a word about black man stabbed in the street by men of the King's Regiment, as if in a town of 15,000 or so, murder was an everyday thing. You see, they talk about everything but the fact that the black man lost his life. It's generally like a reminder of what happens on the west side of Montreal, right? When Benjamites, listen, they're talking about all type of crime on the east side, or whatever the case is. Benjamites are damn near being forgotten in the city of Montreal because they're not French speaking. Or they might get an article one day and the next day is gone. That same way, Joseph Pearson was like, yeah, it happened. It is what it is. Let's not talk about it. Someone stealing doorknobs someone stealing doorknobs is more relevant than a black man being stabbed in the middle of the street by men of the King's Regiment, which was the army at the time. The Royal Army at that. Imagine. It wasn't so to Jane Wilson. She popped into Pearson's cook shop the night that 4 soldiers ate there and then ran off without paying their bill. Listen, I don't think y'all understand. There's a pattern of Caucasian crimes. It's in their nature. They're not even, listen, you being in the King's Regiment, you must have a proper salary. What do you mean you're running off without paying the bill? Good night. The Bible calls you a vagabond. That's what the Bible calls Caucasian people, vagabonds. It's in their nature to be criminals. They can't even live an honest life of being in the King's Regiment and paying for the bill of a dinner. Damn. Pearson had chased after them, and 10 minutes later he stumbled back in, stunned and covered in blood. He asked her to feel his head if his head was cut. And no, it wasn't, she said, though it was bloodied. I'm a dead man, he said as he fainted and fell to the floor. She then checked his stomach as he asked, loosened his clothes, and saw his innards busting out of a deep cut by his navel. He got stabbed in the gut by these white people, who were the criminals. Now, he imagined his whole insides are spilling out of his stomach. Good night. And nobody talked about that in the news. Good night. He made it through the long Wednesday night. Young Robert Nelson, the doctor, was called. Using a bloodletting and other tricks of his trade, he tried his best to get the swelling in the belly down. Police Magistrate Mondelet was on the case by morning. Jane Wilson told him her story and gave him a cap that one of the soldiers had left behind, with 2 calico handkerchiefs and a pair of mitts in it. She gave him a brass chip from a bayonet sheath. that she'd found on the ground by the door. Pearson, writing in pain, was clear-headed enough to speak for himself, though in no shape to sign his statement. If he'd signed it, they'd have known his name was Pearson and not Pearson. You see, just the way they're the spelling of it. Somebody signed it for him, right? So it said, Joseph Pearson of Montreal, pastry cook, being duly sworn on the Holy Evangelist's deposit, and said that yesterday evening between the hours of 7 and 8 o'clock, there came into the house of deponent in Notre Dame Street 4 soldiers of the 1st Battalion of the King's or 8th Regiment, and asked deponent to give them supper. That deponent did so, and after demanded payment of the 4 men for the supper he had furnished them, which they refused, and on the deponents following them out in the streets and demanding his payment, one of the said soldiers struck the deponent over his head with his bayonet, and another of them at the same time struck his bayonet into the belly of the deponent and immediately ran away. The opponent then came into his house and fell on the floor. The opponent does not know the name of the man that stabbed him, but thinks he should know him again if he saw him. Sworn before me at Montreal, 9th March 1815. So there's the what do you call it again? I forgot. His police report, right? That's his police report. He said, yeah, they came, they asked for supper. And obviously, just like today, you know, you see soldiers, it's an honor to serve some soldiers or whatever the case is, right? Well, he had the honor to serve the soldiers and, you know, receive a knife in the gut. Let me show you what a bayonet looks like. I'm going to show you what a bayonet is, yeah? Let me share my screen right here. This is a bayonet. These long rifles with a knife at the end. That's what a bayonet looks like. This man got struck in the head, most likely with the stock of the bayonet by one soldier, and the other soldier at the same time stabbed him in the gut. Yeah, good night. You see this? The black and white image at the left. This is what happened to that brother. The brother was feeding these soldiers, talking about fighting for your country. You know, it's an honor serving. Listen, y'all are criminals. Y'all could not pay the bill. Well, you felt too entitled because you claim you served your country. And this is what happened. When oppressors are not profiled, crime happens. And we suffer for it. You understand? The same way they have no issues of profiling you, you shouldn't have an issue of profiling them. That's it. Salakia, we want to chime in. I think Officer Ayar is frozen.
No, I'm here, priest.
Okay, so you want to chime in on that?
I just want to add with the bayonets, like, because the bayonet was one of the main lethal weapon back in the days, like especially during the French Empire, you know what I'm saying, like especially in Haiti. And you see how he's about to stab that, you know what I'm saying, that dude, that Edomite's about to stab the other Edomite. They used to do that in time of slavery in the South, in the Caribbean, and it was atrocity. Sometimes they will put that you know what I'm saying, that long knife, you know what I'm saying, in the throat, you know what I'm saying, like from the mouth of the slave till, you know what I'm saying, till, you know what I'm saying, like all the way to his stomach. Sometimes they used to make the slave sit on it.
Right.
That's how cruel, you know what I'm saying, like these people are. You understand?
Damn right. And we're not trying to, how could I say, speak hatefully on them. We're just speaking about the crimes that the criminal committed. Like, you see, whenever, you know, people commit crime, they say, oh, it's horrible, this happened, and they describe it. I mean, it is horrible. It happens to be the Caucasian men who did it. Why didn't he go to a place where Caucasian people were serving dinner? Why did he have to go to a place to where a brother was serving dinner and he decided not to pay the brother? And when he chased him down to say, pay for the meal that, you know, I provided for you soldiers. I provided for you of the King's Battalion, of the 4th Regiment. Turn around, they gun butt him with the stock of the bayonet, and then they stabbed him in the gut. And it's not just, he didn't even just get poked. Imagine that. The person who found him and who was checking for wounds said his innards spilled out. His whole intestines came out of his gut. Good night. Oh, oppressor is a monstrous beast. Salakia. Let me get back to the PowerPoint. So it says the 1st Battalion of the 8th King's Regiment, veterans of the Upper Canadian Front in the War of 1812, was in barracks by the Quebec Gate, east side of town. Magistrate Mondelet told the officers there what was up. Find out who's missing a cap, he suggested. He held onto the cap, but gave them the white, blue, and brown handkerchiefs so that they could find out who they belonged to. Then he went back to Pearson's with a soldier in tow. So he make an investigation and is trying to find out who is responsible for the murder of the brother. And the said Joseph Pearson, being duly sworn, deposed and said that William Thompson, a private soldier in the 1st Battalion of His Majesty's 8th Regiment, or Kings, now being present and shown to the said Joseph Pearson, is one of the 4 soldiers mentioned in the preceding deposition, who had supper at the opponent's house yesterday evening. That it was not the said William Thompson who stabbed the said opponent with the bayonet, but the said William Thompson was present, so he remembers one of the soldiers who were there. If he could see the others, he would recognize him right away. That's what he said as well. Slovakia. About midnight that Thursday, Dr. Nelson opened the wound a bit to push the gut. Meaning he's trying to put, listen, he's trying to put the intestines back inside. The omentum, he called it, back in, and Pearson breathed more easily for an hour. But then he sank, and just before 2 o'clock on Friday morning, it was over. So he died of his wounds. Magistrate Mondelet, who was also the coroner, collected 12 men for a jury and held an inquest at Pearson's that day. They saw the body laid out, saw the bayonet wound and the cap Jane Wilson had found. They heard her account of what Pearson had said on his deathbed, and they heard Dr. Nelson's conclusion. From the examination of the body after death, it appears beyond a doubt that the wound was the cause of his death. They had no trouble reaching a verdict. Murder by a soldier unknown of the 8th King's Regiment. Imagine serving a verdict, but where is the accused? Good night. Shouldn't there be someone who's being accused of a crime? How are you going to serve a verdict and there's no one to accuse, to put the crime on? How does that make sense? I guess justice was served. Oh, press is a goddamn devil. It's lucky. Still no words in the newspapers. At the barracks that Thursday, Private James Douglas of the light company of the regiment had quickly come under suspicion. He'd been absent at roll call just before 8 on Wednesday evening, and when they held an inspection on Thursday at noon to check for a missing cap, he'd borrowed the cap of a soldier laid up in the sick ward, though that wasn't known until later. So they found out that the actual potential perpetrator is Private James Douglas. Now, did he go to jail? But George McCullough, pay sergeant of the light company, showed around one of the handkerchiefs that afternoon and was told it belonged to Douglas. Douglas denied this, but a soldier was eventually found who swore it was part of a piece of cloth white, brown, and blue spot that he'd given Douglas in December. At noon on the Saturday, with the case no longer one of assault but of murder, Sergeant Major John Binns, with Sergeants McCullough and John Kennedy, paraded the whole 1st Battalion to get to the bottom of the matter. When he came to Douglas, Binns stopped. Something fishy about Douglas's hat. McCullough swore that this wasn't one of the hats he'd issued to his men. It was made by Hicks and Keats and Company, not by Bicknell and Moore like the others. And instead of fur lappets or trim, it had ribbons in a different cockade and strings. Good night, and no ditty. And strings to tie it under the chin. Kennedy, sergeant of the light company, had never seen Douglas wear anything like this before. Douglas was thrown into the guardhouse. Later, they led him to his bunk to check his bayonet and scabbard. When he pulled them out, it turned out that the bayonet was his, but the scabbard was one he'd borrowed from soldier James Hines. Pressed, he pulled out another bayonet and scabbard, with the scabbard missing a brass bit. And this time, it turned out that the scabbard was his, but the bayonet in it belonged to Hines. On the Monday and Tuesday, a succession of soldiers paraded before Magistrate Mondelet at the police office, giving their statements. On Wednesday the 15th, he had the prisoner brought in, but Douglas knew nothing about nothing, anything, or so he said. As for William Thompson, who'd been fingered by Pearson as present at his stabbing, he had an alibi. A fellow soldier swore Thompson had been with him at the barracks all evening the Wednesday before, except for a few minutes, never long enough to have gone for supper. So basically, nobody's being prosecuted or charged for the murder. Even though they have the culprit, they have all the evidence, but they're not charging him with nothing. Nobody stepped forward to explain or confess. So Douglas alone stood charged. He was held in September.
I can't hear you online. I don't know if you could hear me. I can't hear you.
I can hear you, other one. But they say they can't hear me. So like, let me see. Let me do a sound check.
So like, yeah, we still can't hear you over here.
I would check your check your sound, because I'm checking right now online. I could hear online. Yeah, I would check your sound if you could.
Like, we having technical difficulties, you know what I'm saying? Like the oppressor is the damn devil the Bible speak of. You know what I'm saying? Let's just get it fixed in a few. Oppressor is the damn devil the Bible speak of. You know what I'm saying? Let's just get it fixed in a few. So like I preach, I don't know if you could hear me. They hear me online, but we can't hear you on your end.
I hear you. I think it's on your side.
So like I preach, I don't know if you could hear me. They hear me online, but we can't hear you on your end.
I hear. So Officer Adiar has some technical difficulties. He'll figure it out. Until then, let's go back to the PowerPoint. So basically, a brother was murdered, right? Was unalive. Sorry, it's a lack. He was unalive by some soldiers. They found the culprit. They're trying to bring him to justice, but even though they have the proof, they're saying, yeah, I mean, to no avail. And nobody's speaking about this in the newspaper of Montreal. You understand? So it said the grand jury convened then, studied the charge, and on September 7th found no bail. So they have all the evidence, but they say, yeah, we can't do nothing. We're not judging him guilty. It's true, strictly speaking, that the evidence showed only that Douglas had been at Pearson's the night he was killed, that he'd done his best to hide the fact that with his lies and denials and tricks was awfully suspicious behavior, but it didn't prove he was the killer. They didn't have the science then to take fingerprints, match the blade to the wound, test for blood on the bayonet or on Douglas's clothes, etc. So the grand jury decided there wasn't enough evidence for a trial, and that was that. 2 days later, the court let Douglas go. You know what's amazing about that is they did not need any evidence when it came to Emmett Till. They did not need any evidence when it came to Rosewood, where the white woman said that she got sexually assaulted by a black man, when the truth came out that she was getting, whored out all around town by a white man. And then they burned down the city of Rosewood based on that lie. They could lie about black men at any time and not require any evidence. But they have damn near all the evidence they needed to prosecute that white man who unalived an honest, working black man, right? Who served them food. They decided not to pay. He's chasing them down so they make sure they pay. And listen, imagine being stabbed so bad that your intestines come out of your gut. Imagine that. They have all the evidence. And they still said, you know what? We don't have enough evidence, so he's free to go. Our oppressor is the goddamn devil the Bible speaks of. He can't show us otherwise.
Right.
You understand? And select this keep reading. Still no words in the papers. So this is the news almost 200 years late about the latest late news you'll ever get. Montreal, March 8, 1815, Joseph Pearson, who ran a restaurant on Notre Dame Street, was stabbed in the gut with a bayonet by an unknown soldier of the 8th King's Regiment, who got away with murder. Now, keep in mind that soldier, we're going to see him later down the line in another story. It's funny to say, right? He never got prosecuted. He never went to jail for that. He stabbed one of another entrepreneur in Montreal during slavery, another black entrepreneur. Remember, Cesar Joronat was a manager of one of the biggest businesses in Montreal, probably the only black manager at the time during slavery. Slavery ended in 1834, so roughly 29 years later, right? Joseph was running a restaurant. They say, you know what? It doesn't matter. It's just a nigga. He should be in chains anyways. So they ran off on the bill that they didn't pay. When he was chasing them down to let them know, listen, you need to pay for your meal just like anyone else. You're not special. They gun butt him and they stabbed him in the gut. And no one went to jail for that. So remember next time, Joseph Pearson, the black man who was stabbed in the gut and who never received justice. Salakia. You want to chime in real quick on that, other one?
Nah, go ahead. You got it, priest.
Yeah, no sweat. Salakia, give me 1 second. This is the new light. So to work with light is to play with shadow. You can't have one without the other. They're the two sides of the coin, like sound and silence. And Warren Glosson knew both sides. He was a lamp lighter for a while. For those who don't know, we didn't have street lights like we have like back in the days, like we have right now. We had something called the lamp lighters. In order for you to see in the middle of darkness, in the middle of the street, people were paid to light up the lamps. You're gonna find out brothers were doing that. Who knew about this? Who knew that before the street lights all around downtown, you had black people, even for you to be able to chase down criminals, you needed black people as lamp lighters, literally to shed the light in the darkness, so you could just walk around safe, so the policemen could do their job. Without us, I mean, good night. Isn't that biblical? Out of one, it's what it say. We are to be the light of the Gentiles. We literally were the light of Montreal.
God. And so like that's everywhere. You know what I'm saying? Like if I could, you know what I'm saying, interject, like that's everywhere,
No,
like we've been. Like, and this is why, you know what I'm saying, like even like the alcohol, like you was talking about earlier, like we the people behind everything. KFC, you know what I'm saying, black people, this, the light pole, the light and light pole, black people, everything, like, you know what I'm saying, that we need is, you know what I'm saying, like today, it's black people made them, you know what I'm saying, like why? Because we are the light and the salt of the earth, you know what I'm saying, like the salt of the earth, meaning, you know what I'm saying, like in the Bible, meaning like, you know what I'm saying, like we, you know what I'm saying, like we have the qualities of keeping the laws inside of us and whatnot, you know what I'm saying, and to teach the other nation to do so. But not only that, you know what I'm saying, like everything revolves around Black, Hispanics, and Native Indian. So one thing that I love to say is without Black, Hispanics, and Native Indian, you know what I'm saying, this world will be like a plain bagel.
I would just say this would be like unseasoned flour, not even a bagel.
Oh, God.
Good night. It's a lot here. The newspaper was pretty clear about this fate yesterday at 2:00 a.m. Warren Glosson and Jean-Baptiste Albert for burglary and Abraham Paradis for sheep stealing were executed upon the drop in rear of the gale agreeable to their sentences at the last court of the King's Bench. It was more like 10 a.m. and Paradis had actually been convicted on 2 counts that had nothing to do with sheep, and he'd be stealing cattle and horses. But who at the time for a little thing like that at a time like this? The records of Christ Church confirm the essentials. Warren Glosson, a Negro, was hanged on the 24th of October, 1823, aged 35 years, and was buried on the same day by me, John Bethune, rector. I'm gonna find out what he was charged for. Actually, I don't remember, but I don't think he was actually guilty. I think he just forgot to light up the lamp. That's it. We're gonna look at this right now. And what had he done to deserve that? He walked into the shadows and fallen in with thieves. He already had brushes with the law for stealing in early 1818 and in 1819 and 1820, but always seemed to get off. The one time his luck had failed him was in mid-July 1819 for running a brothel. He had been locked up till the end of the month, then put in the pillory in the marketplace for an hour. The pillory, I forgot what the pillory is. It's not jail, but you know, he's not getting serious consequences for his acts. Not that did any good, Salakia. On the 9th of January 4th, 1823, his gang cut a hole in the window of a shop on McGill Street and snatched 15 pounds worth of black satin cloth and other things on display. Small potatoes, you might say, not for Mr. Hitchcock, the shopkeeper, and not in 1823. Yeah, theft was even considered even a worse of a crime back in the days. Yeah, they were not playing with that at all. There's no such thing as getting a slap on the wrist or whatever the case is, right? And I forgot, this is the pillory. You see when people are portrayed being like a piece of wood around their neck and their hands, they can't move. Let me show you the pillory exactly. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna show you exactly what was his good night. This is the pillory. So basically this was his punishment, right? It's like getting a slap in the wrist, because you're not going to jail. You're staying like this for, you know, couple hours, and then you're back at doing whatever stupidness you were doing, right? I don't think it's not bad. It is bad because they're putting a lot of slaves in the pillory back in the days, and they were beating them, they were starving them, they were not giving them any water. But for him, I guess he thought it was a slap on the wrist for himself, because clearly he did not change his ways right away, right? We'll go back to the PowerPoint. So 4 nights later, they struck again out in Lachine. There, they broke into the offices of Whiting and Crane, a forwarding company shipping goods up and down the river. Warren Glosson and his crew boosted some clothes, about 30 blue army fatigue jackets. But what really hurt Whiting and Crane is that they took their books. Without those business records, the company couldn't tell whether it was coming or going. 2,000 pounds in accounts was up in the air. Whiting and Crane offered a reward for $100 reward for information, and within a day or two, they got results. They found their papers stashed at a scuzzy tavern in Reckless suburb west of McGill Street. The gang was caught, tried after some delay, and on September 10th, 3 of them, Warren Glosson, Jean-Baptiste Albert, and Peter Johnson, were sentenced to death. A few days later, Johnson's sentence was commuted to 5 years on the treadmill at Quebec, so Glosson and Albert were the only members of the gang to hang. You see? So Peter Johnson was not hanged. He changed his sentence from death sentence to the treadmill, which was a punishment. People think the treadmill today was to make slaves run until exhaustion. The treadmill, see, at the gym, they had that in slavery, just so y'all know, right? It was not to get the slaves fit. It was a punishment. Stealing cloth and old account books is no hanging offense, you might say, but burglary was a capital crime then. Breaking and entering, stealing from a home, sheep stealing, horse stealing, and hundreds of things we think of as petty crimes back then was really serious. That same September, in 2 separate cases, the court sentenced 2 white men to death for breaking into a house and stealing a watch. And it's not as if Warren Glosson didn't know the rules. After all, he'd been busted before. He'd also been a member of the Night Watch, the police force that worked dusk to dawn. Not a full-fledged cop, none of them were. He was a lamplighter, one of 4 black men hired to mind the streetlights when streetlights were the latest thing. So before turning to a criminal, Glosson was a lamplighter, meaning he was making sure that he lights up the streets so that the police chase down the criminals. That's what he was doing. One of 4 black men. You understand? This is our history in Montreal. We were the light back then, but they're not teaching that in school. We were the street lights. It was a white businessman of St. Paul Street, then the main commercial street, who had the bright idea of putting oil lamps on the streets of Montreal. In October, November 1815, Samuel Dawson and some fellow businessmen had put up 22 on the stretch of St. Paul between the Old Market, which is Place Royale today, and McGill Street. They cost just under $7 a piece. The idea caught fire, and soon people were collecting money to pay for lights farther east on St. Paul and on Notre Dame Street, which was uptown back then, but today is downtown. So people see, yeah, you know what? That's a smart idea. Let's invest in it and let's get street lights as well in our neighborhoods.
So like a priest.
Kawakan.
So are you saying like during like nighttime we were the one holding up the lights and you know what I'm saying, like putting lights on the streets?
We wouldn't hold up the lights, but they were putting like light poles, right? It's like an oil lamp. Okay, imagine the street lights today as opposed to having like a light bulb. It was like the damn, I forgot what's the word. The thing that contains the oil lamp. That's it. They were basically lighting up by hand the lights.
Okay.
Right. Let me see if I can find a quick image real quick. Okay, there you go. Let me share my screen real quick. Let me stop sharing the PowerPoint. So you see these. The second image right here, or the first one, you had to light the lamp by hand back in the days. And we were the one, we were like we were 4 black men in Montreal doing this.
Yeah.
In what is known as downtown today. So we were not holding up the lights, but we were climbing up and lighting up the lamp basically. We might still see a few of them downtown Montreal, a
Yeah,
few of them that remain that are
I
not
believe,
used.
Salaki, I believe that we might find some in Old Port. You know what I'm
Oh,
saying?
absolutely.
I think I've seen them in the Old Port.
Kawakan. So yeah, we were lighting them at night, basically. Just so, like, let's say your business is being attacked by how do you say it? Vandal? I think it's vandals.
Yeah,
You know,
cool.
we had to light up these street lamps so that the police could chase them in the darkness. If it wasn't for us, you would not be able to chase criminals. So, like, of course, the president have the truth, and oppression make it the wise men mad. So you could understand how this brother's like, damn, he went from lamp lighter in the police force to become the one chased in the darkness. Good night. But the point is, without us, they would not have been able to chase down criminals in the darkness of downtown Montreal, because we were the lamplighters. So, like, let me go back to the PowerPoint. So all of a sudden, everybody wanted lights. From being a private idea, lighting became a public service. So at some point, remind you, it's just one white man that say, yeah, I'm gonna put up some lights. Now, from being a private idea, everybody wanted lights. At first, not everybody had lights in the streets. Even then, remember, some people used to walk around with the lamp in their hand. They see it was a good idea, so now, yeah, the niggas have a lot more on their hands to do. On April 1st, 1818, the governor in Quebec approved a law giving the city the power to set up a night watch and organize street lighting. Magistrates ran the show. There was no mayor and council until 1833. The magistrates sprang into action as soon as the law passed, and the watch was up and running by May 1st. By law, the force was limited to 24 men at the outside. As foreman or chief of the watch, they hired Emmanuel d'Auberville, a French-born soldier of fortune who served with army in Europe before winding up a captain of the Voltigeurs Canadiens in the War of 1812. Hard up in 1818, he had written up to the magistrates begging for the chief's job. They handed it to him on April 18 at a salary of £75 a year. You might think it's nothing, but back in the days, yeah, they're making money. Like, that's how they're making money. Before the inflation of Donald Trump. 6 days later, they hired Antoine Lafrenière as his deputy at £60. And no, the black men were not paid like the white people. Just so in case you ask. D'Auberville then rounded up 20 men, 14 laborers, a butcher, a carpenter, a shoemaker, a river pilot, a voyager, and a gardener to work for 6 months as watchmen at 3 shillings a night. So there were 22 in all. Off they went, pounding the beat with whistles and sticks, sounding off the hours one by one. Past 1 o'clock and a starlit morning. Try that today, and it's called disturbing the peace. Yeah, these people, listen, imagine in the middle of the night, you hear like people knocking and banging on stuff to let you know it's 1 o'clock a.m. You call the police on them. Back in the days, that's what they had to do. It's 1 o'clock. Make sure you go to bed. Stay off the streets at night. Go home. People are banging on the walls and banging sticks and whistles back then. So 6 months on, those watchmen who had pulled lamplighter duty had enough. Too messy, maybe, handling that fish oil, trimming the wicks, cleaning off the suit, probably thought it was beneath them. You know, I didn't join the force to be a damn wick trimmer. You see, when they say black people don't want to work, black people are lazy, listen, barely 6 months in, they're like, I don't want to work no more. This ain't for me. And then you dare call us lazy. Imagine that. And that's when 4 black men became the watchmen or the lamplighters. Why? Because white people didn't want to work. That's why. In the middle of slavery, white people said, "Gee, there might be some things the slaves could do. Even though we're getting paid, they're not. You know, let them do it." So on November 17, D'Obreville tells the Kawakan.
Salakia, if I may, Salakia, you know what I'm saying? I didn't want to cut you up. But this happens also today, like, you know what I'm saying, especially in the industry, you know what I'm saying, like a lot of industry in Montreal. Like I work inside of like a place like you could say a freezer where it's cold. Like, you know what I'm saying, you have white people that came in, you know what I'm saying, like at one point I was doing the training of one of the white guys, right? And we work in the freezer. It's supposed to be cold. White people are supposed to use to the cold, like, you understand. You have all Levi's, Asian people in there. Then the dude, like, you understand, like, yo, I can't do this, man. This is like slave work.
Damn.
Yeah, so good. And, all along, you know what I'm saying? Like, we working, and you have like white old people. Like recently, they hired like an old Asian man that's 70 years old in my slavery. They hired him and everything, and they were saying like, well, he can't work. I'm like, yo, the dude is like 70 years old. What you want him to do? You know what I'm saying? But that white guy was like, you know what I'm saying, his early 30s, you know what I'm saying, early 30s, 20s, whatever. You know what I'm saying? And then he said, this is a slave work. And he said, like, you know what? Let me go to the bathroom. That was his first day at the slavery, man. He said, let me go to the bathroom. He went to the bathroom, like, you know what I'm saying? You got 10-minute bathroom break. You know what I'm saying? It was 20 minutes, the dude in there. 30 minutes, the dude in there. Then the slave master, whatnot, you know what I'm saying? The slave master came up to me, you know what I'm saying? Like, where to do that? I'm like, I don't know. He went to the bathroom and shit. So, like, I mean, what you want me to do? I'm not gonna follow him in the bathroom. Then they went to check in the bathroom and everything. The dude empty out his locker, you know what I'm saying? His locker and just dip work, the slavery, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, this happens.
Imagine that.
You know what I'm saying? Like, while you have like, you know what I'm saying, like 70-year-old man working at the slavery where I'm at, you have Edomites, white people saying, like, you know what, we can't do this, man. You know what I'm saying? This is not, like, you know what I'm saying, fit for human beings. So, like,
imagine that. That's damn near just like the story we just read about Louis-Joseph Papineau. His father bought a 54-year-old slave. This man is on the verge of death. What are you buying him for? Free the man. You understand? And they're like, yeah, let's just hire a 70-year-old Haitian. He's gonna do the work that the white man don't want to do. And that's exactly what we did as lamplighters in Montreal. They're getting paid. And they said 6 months in, I don't feel like doing this. This is exactly what they said. Listen, they said exactly what the white man out of slavery said. He said, what? That's some slave work. I don't want to do this. Which is when we became lamplighters. Why? Because white people are lazy. Like we read earlier, white people started playing the victims during slavery because they were losing their slaves. Their blood, sweat, and tears was not the one being shed, yet they played the victims. White people truly have victim mentality, and they're the lazy ones. How do we know they're the lazy ones? Beside those two examples, we built these countries. Look up who built the high-rises building in New York. Look up who are the Skywalkers. The Skywalkers are native Indians. It has another term for black men in Chicago. I think it's called, I forgot. But in Chicago, we had brothers that did the same thing as the Skywalkers in New York. And then they dare call us lazy? Of course we don't feel like working. We know we're slaves. We don't feel like being slaves no more. We're tired of oppression. Guess what? We still go into slavery. You understand? Well, you come out You work for like 5 minutes, be like, damn, that's some slave work. I seen a video with Officer Malakma. This white man was trying to work alongside Mexicans in the fields. After 2 hours, he said, I can't do this. This is slave work. Mexican look at him like, are you okay? Like, yeah, this is slave work. I can't do that. I feel like I'm about to die. Well, guess what? We've been doing this for 400 years and still doing it today.
Right.
Yeah, you can't do this for 5 minutes? Well, according to Isaiah chapter 14, verse 1 and 2, you better get used to it. Salakia. Let's get back to the PowerPoint. It says 6 months on, those watchmen, mind you, they're what, 22 to 24 white men who had pulled lamplighter duty had enough. Not even a year. I think over here, what? You can't get unemployment only 6 months in. I think you need minimum 6 months. That's why 6 months in, like, let me get my unemployment check. Too messy, maybe, handling the fish oil, trimming the wicks, cleaning off the suit. Probably thought it was beneath them. You know, I didn't join the force to be a damn wick trimmer. On November 17, Dobreville tells the magistrates that seeing as how none of his men want to be lighting technicians, he has selected 4 Negroes for this object. Listen, beggars can't be choosers. It's still in the middle of slavery. You think a black man will say, no, I don't want to work? You can't say no for nothing. Then and there, the magistrate resolved that the foreman of the watch hired these 4 Negroes to be paid 2 shillings for each lamp per month. 2 shillings for each lamp per month. Let me go back a few. How much were they getting paid again? They're getting paid, let me see. Where is it again? So for these white watchmen were getting paid to work for 6 months as watchmen at 3 shillings a night. Mind you, the white man is getting paid 3 shillings a night. The black man is getting paid 2 shillings per month for each lamp per month. Imagine that. That's how Warren Glosson, Peter Dago, John Hires, and Prince Thompson, laborers all from the Quebec suburb, they say laborers, a black laborer in slavery is a slave, came to be public servants, hired as the lamplighters of the night watch for the winter and spring of 1818 to 1819. No whistles and clubs for the Negroes. You see how the white man had the whistle and the sticks to beat to let you know, hey, it's 1 a.m. They said, no, we're not giving that to niggas. That's too much. They're lighting the lamps and that's it. That's it. Not more than that. From the 2-room watch headquarters in the old convent of the Recollet priests behind John Trim's place, they set out on their rounds with funnels and ladders, jugs of whale or cod oil, loads of cotton wick, and soap and water and turpentine for cleaning. Salakia. One of them always stayed back at the headquarters in case someone reported a light out somewhere that needed quick fixing. There was light then, and Warren Glosson and his buddies made it happen. If it wasn't for black people, white people would just gave up. They said, listen, if you get robbed, you get mugged in the street, it ain't my business. I ain't finna do that. That's what the white man said. Was tired of it. You don't even care about your safety. Your woman could get assaulted in the middle of the night, and because a white man is lazy, she would get assaulted in the middle of the night. Your kids would disappear because a white man is lazy back in the days. That's really it. And black men had to pick up the slack and be like, you know what? Shit, they can't even say no anyways. They did their job. They did the job the white man wouldn't do. That's what happened in Montreal. Understand? Next time in Montreal, they call you lazy, just remind them of the lamplighters. Remind them that the white man was too lazy to be a lamplighter and provide safety. The white man didn't want to be the light to the Gentiles. It's a lot here. The white man didn't want to be a light to the Gentiles. We had to be the light to the Gentiles physically. and we will also be spiritually. It's a lot, guy. I see you unmuted yourself.
Nah, go ahead. I was just agreeing with what you're saying.
Yeah, the white man is a lazy. White man is lazy. That's it. And here's the proof. Next time they call you lazy, just remind them of the lamplighters. So,
and Salaki, if I may, also, like, you know what I'm saying, like, white people might be like, well, you know what, this is old time. Well, recently, you know what I'm saying, they're saying the Mexican was stealing their job. Trump said, you know what I'm saying, like, let's deport the Mexican. Now you have a bunch of fruits, bunch of vegetables, like, rotting on the, you know what I'm saying, on their farm. The, you know what I'm saying, the farmers are you know what I'm saying, are yelling like, you know what I'm saying, like, how we say in Creole, I'm way. You know what I'm saying? They I'm way, you know what I'm saying, like, we're losing our product, you know what I'm saying? They're rotting on the ground. Meanwhile, white people, you know what I'm saying, like, can't pick them up. You know what I'm saying? Like, so who's really lazy? You know what I'm saying? Like, and just to add up as well, if it wasn't for white people intervention and evil mind, like you see, like countries like Haiti, like Dominican Republic, like Caribbean, we will be like, you know what I'm saying, like farmers over there and doing exporting, and you know what I'm saying, like, you know what I'm saying, exporting the food that you want to have over here as well, like mangoes, like avocados, you know what I'm saying. You would have the freshest and the best if, you know what I'm saying, like, if they didn't, you know what I'm saying, like, try to mess up, you know what I'm saying, agriculture over there. Even rice, Haiti had a big rice production, but they mess it up, you know what I'm saying, and now we have to buy rice from other places, like especially United States. So, like,
damn right. You know, and I'm telling you right now, first-hand experience, because I don't know if you remember my brethren Gustavo, who was unalive 2 years ago. He was working in the wine fields in Vancouver, right? And over there was just Mexicans and Salvadorians. There's not one white man picking grapes in the wine fields in Canada. You know, I know personally people that go up at 6 in the morning, right? Even some of the brethren in the neighborhood used to say, yo, let's go. There's a bus at a subway station. There's a bus you could take at 5, 6 in the morning. They'll bring you to pick some fruits. You know who's picking the fruits? It's the West Indians, it's the Haitians, and it's the Latinos. There's not one white man over there picking fruits, even in Canada. White man's lazy. Now again, when they call you lazy in Canada, if you're Black, Latino, Native American, Indian, they call you lazy just to remind them of the lamplighters. Because with all these black men who took up the job as a lamplighter, you would have the Amber Alert of the back in the days almost every day. Why? Because nobody's safe in the darkness. Salakia. One of them, Salakia, yeah. In fact, in February 1819, there were 174 street lamps in town. Imagine that. Damn. You had to divide that. Matter of fact, you can't even divide that by 4, because one of them had to stay at the headquarters in case someone tells them, yo, there's a street lamp that needs fixing, right? So you get 174, you divide this by 3, it's 58 lamps per man. Good night. You have to make sure these lamps are lit up every night. Keep in mind that these lamps, you besides keeping them clean and so, you can't let them burn during the day. You light them up at night and you turn them out and you put them out. So in fact, by February 1819, there were 174 street lamps in town. At 2 shillings a lamp per month, that means the team would have been paid 17 pounds and 8 shillings a month, or 4 pounds and 7 shillings apiece. The other watchmen were paid 3 shillings for every night they worked. So if they worked, say, 30 nights a month, they gave them 4 pounds and 10 shillings. But with the odd night off, they made a little less than that. So the lamplighters were paid about the same as regular watchmen, just a bit less. So much for wages. Working conditions were another matter. For one thing, Warren Glosson and the lamplighters were hired under different terms from the rest. Surprisingly, right? As a crew instead of one by one, and paid not per working day but according to the number of lamps in use. But maybe that wasn't so bad. The number of lamps kept going up, and by February 1819, the magistrates were already saying they needed 502 more. So it wasn't bad, you may consider, because they're making more money as there's more lamps being put up. But damn, I mean, good night. The stress on these brothers. If the watchman's duty was to stroll about and keep an eye out, the lamplighters had to hustle. Why? Because how can the watchman keep an eye out if they can't see in the dark? The point is, in order for you to be able to make your job, I have to be able to make my job. You can't work without me. I mean, these lamplighters were essential for the watchman's duty. One by one, all those lights all over town had to be lit, one by one, 7 nights a week and promptly. And one by one, they all had to be killed come morning. Yeah, I understand why the white man didn't want to do this. I feel like a slave too. Good night. And I'm a slave. Damn. And if a lamp was damaged, the lamp lighters had to cough up for repairs or pay for a new one, unless they found a witness to swear that the thing had broken through no fault of theirs. Meaning, someone smashes the lamp, just like, you know, criminals smash cameras all the time. Someone smashes the lamp lighters pay out of their own pockets, even though they're not at fault. Unless there's a witness that said, well, I seen this criminal break the lamp, or this kid threw a rock at it. What if somebody smashed a lamp for kicks and when no one was looking? Well, that was one hard rule, but it was typical of working conditions then. Look at St. Antoine suburb. When residents there asked that the night watch cover their area, they struck a deal. 6 of them would be allowed to join the force, and as they wished, they would patrol only their own turf, but they wouldn't be paid a cent. No 3 shillings a night, no 2 shillings per star in the sky, nothing. Pounding the beat for free sounds crazy now. Like hanging Warren Glosson for burglary, but that's how things stood. Warren Glosson knew the score all right. He worked with the lights, but the shadows drew on him. And that last day, walking to platform behind jail, the Lord have mercy on my soul, he kept saying, like he couldn't believe how dark is what it was for a morning. The lighting's much different in Montreal now. You look at the street lights and maybe you don't think twice about them. Maybe you think the way their heads are bowed, kind of sad looking, right? Salakia. I don't know if you can see. Yeah, that was what we're trying to show. There's a street lamp right here. You could barely see it. But the point is, all those street lights were manned by 4 brothers who ended up, you know, turning to the dark side, let's say. I mean, oppression make a wise man mad, right? And this is what happened with these brothers. They would surely be oppressed, lighting one lamp after another and putting them out by the morning, one by one, fixing every single lamp. They had to pay for it out of their own pockets. Good night. Lord be with these brothers. The oppressor is the devil. Why? Because the white man's lazy. That's why they had to do it. They had to do it because the white man's lazy. That's really it. But next time someone calls you lazy at work or whatever the case is, remind them of the lamplighters in Montreal. Next time I want to talk about how beautiful the street looks at night because it's lit up and everything, remind them of the lamplighters in Montreal. They tell you, go back to where you're from. They don't want you over here. Well, remind them of the lamplighters in Montreal. Salakia.
Salakia, priest, if I could interject, right?
Kawakan.
And I know this is in Canada, but you know what I'm saying, like just an example I want to use, like when Donald Trump is saying, like, you know what I'm saying, let's make America great again. You know what I'm saying? America and Canada, well, the US and Canada, you know what I'm saying, was only great for white people when we were doing this type of work. When we was in slavery. You know what I'm saying? Like it was never great ever before, you know what I'm saying, for white people until we were the ones, you know what I'm saying, Black, Hispanics, and Native, we were the one doing the work that they don't want to do. So like
damn right. So lucky. We get to the next one. This is Trim the Gardener. This is another Black, we call it pioneer, if you want to call it entrepreneur, right, in Montreal that nobody talks about. There's probably more than one woman, slave or free, who made eyes at John Trim. About 40 when slavery peaked and then crashed, he was free, self-employed, unattached, dabbling in real estate. You could say he's the most eligible bachelor, and you might not be far wrong. He would have been the catch. This nigga had it all. And he was free. He was making money. You know, all the ladies were going around him like he was Solomon. You understand? And he was getting the bag. This man was buying properties. Imagine that. Another one. He owned the place at Côte Sainte-Catherine, Outremont, with his friends, the Moors, Henry and Margaret. For those who don't know, Outremont is an amazingly rich neighborhood in Montreal. It's damn near like Westmount, which Westmount is considered like a city within a city. That's how rich it is. You know, that area, imagine that at the time, a black man lives over there. He owns the property. He's not even renting it. They don't teach that in high school. The house was no palace, but it stood on a really large lot, like a farm lot, planted with fruit trees. They paid cash for it too, 600 livres, which is about $100 at the time, when they bought it in April 1796. Good night. This man bought it cash. How many slaves you know buy the house cash? How many men you know buy a house cash in the middle of slavery? Imagine that. Then in summer of 1798, the year Charlotte had started the slave revolt, which is the last story we went over last time, he moved back to town. For $350, paid off over 5 years, he and Henry Moore's wife, Margaret Plovier, bought an old wooden house on the east side of St. Augustine Street on a lot backing onto the property of the Récollet priests. Henry Moore had rented the same house for a year before the three of them moved up to Côte Sainte-Catherine. And in May 1799, look at this. This is another one, another black man who knew how to write. You know how to write, you know how to read. He knew how to write his name, unlike a lot of white people. So in May 1799, on his own time, Trim bought a vacant lot in Saint Antoine suburb for 170 livres, $28. So by 1800, he owned one property and a big chunk of two others. In the middle of slavery, this man is playing Monopoly in the middle of slavery. Slavery is far from over, and he's playing Monopoly, buying one property after the other. You can't make this up. But in school, they will never teach you about successful black men, much least during the time that you were supposed to be in chains in their eyes. He would have been a catch, all right, or had Charlotte already claimed him. That might explain some puzzling things about her revolt, like what kept her in town to face the music rather than run clear after she'd fled from her mistress, Jane Cook? And if she stood 20 years as a Cook family slave, why did she have to run off in freezing February instead of biding her time till April or May or June? Anybody who knows February in Montreal knows it's no time to make a run for it. I agree. Salakia. With no money and no place to stay, Judith Gray and Manuel Allen, who followed her lead, had family to hold them. Charlotte had none. But a well-heeled lover who could give her shelter and get her a lawyer, maybe. All we know for sure is that John Trim and Charlotte married sometime between the late 1790s and September 25, 1808. So she had her Lord. Hey, listen, he had everything. And she had her Lord and Savior. Good night. That was the day Anne Ashley was baptized. She was the baby daughter of Robert Ashley and Margaret Pierce, a black couple who had moved to Montreal from Quebec City a couple years earlier. Charlotte was a sponsor at the baptism along with Margaret Plovier and Alexander Valentine, and she gave her name as Charlotte Trim. Charlotte and John lived out their lives in that house on St. Augustine Street. The old city walls were being torn down at the time, and St. Augustine, which ran along the southwest wall, was broadened and renamed McGill Street. As late as 1813, Charlotte and John Trim's house was one of the only 5 on that new street. Yeah, he owns on the new street a house. Listen, you can't make that up. You understand? In 1 second. Slovakia. Sunday, someone may dig up Trim's past. He was a little older than Charlotte when he surfaced in Montreal. The records usually refer to him as a gardener. He basically, John Trim had his own landscaping business or gardening business. He had his own business. He had 3-4 properties during the time of slavery in Canada. He was a free black man, you know. And he was living in what is today the suburbs. Where I'm telling you, where he was living, I'm gonna go probably next week at Officer Ariar in Outremont neighborhood. We'll just show you the houses of Outremont. They're $1 million houses today. And that's where this black man was living in the middle of slavery. From that, you'd think he was some poor Joe with a hoe. Good night. Tending the flower beds of the rich. But the fact that he was buying up land, paying cash in some cases, suggests something else. And there, another sign that he was no run-of-the-mill laborer. In 1805 and 1806, lawyer James Reed, the future Chief Justice of the Court of King's Bench, gave him 2 promissory notes, which is what post-dated checks, for value received, one for £220, the other for £230 and 4 shillings, either of which would have been more than enough to buy Trim's house on the McGill Street twice over. This man is getting post-dated checks. I think he even getting loans, right? Like never before. No black man is getting any loans or post-dated checks back then, but he is. How did he make this money? In the case of Reed's debt to him, at least part of it may have been payment for laying out gardens or orchards on Reed's East End property. The fruit trees on the Côte Sainte-Catherine property gives us another hint. He grew fruit and probably vegetables, but market gardening hardly seems like a big money maker. John Prune, Rosalie Bunga's husband, grew fruit and vegetables in 1820s and never got rich. Unlike Trim, he never had land of its own. He leased it in St. Louis suburb northeast of town under a deal where his rent amounted to half of what he got for his produce over the year. But Trim is making money. Now, Trim may have been more careful with his money than Prune, but there had to be something else he was doing that gave him that extra cash. It was probably his ham business. The man has businesses, properties. He could have had another wife. He could have had multiple wives. Didn't I? He had it all in the middle of slavery. Shit, he had freedom. Good night. And he was buying property cash. This man playing Monopoly in the middle of slavery. Imagine that. There's the odd reference to him now and then as a dry salter or cure of hams. They seem to have been his specialty. In fact, at his death, 7 hams found at his house were snapped up like prizes by friends and neighbors at a sale of his belongings. Now, obviously, he was not in the truth. So, you know, he was selling unlawful meat. But he was a successful businessman that they don't teach you about in high school. A successful free black businessman. Trim's prosperity was no secret. When in 1821, a dividing wall was built between his property and that of his neighbor Simon Clark, one of the workmen reported that Clark's son had instructed them to build it more than a foot inside Trim's property. Because even if Trim lost a bit of land, he's rich enough that it will hardly hurt him. Imagine that. The white man's such a devil. He's like, yeah, listen, let me steal the land. He has so much land, it don't matter. That's because our oppressor is a goddamn devil. What with all that, you'd expect Trim with Charlotte by his side to cut quite a figure among blacks in Montreal. So he did, and the house on McGill Street was the closest thing to a black community center. Yeah, this man was not a selfish bastard. You understand? There were blacks who boarded there. Robert Moore, for example, at different times, a laborer, servant, and waiter lived there for about 6 months in 1815, probably until his marriage to Senti Williams on November 4 that year. Trim was a witness at their wedding. Abraham Lowe was another who lived there around that time. He had served in the militia up around Quebec City during the War of 1812 before moving to Montreal at the end of 1814. So he was, renting rooms whatsoever. He was letting our people live in the rooms. Then there was Catherine Gillett, William Wright's wife, a living servant of the Trims for 15 years. I'm going to say a living servant, but we know exactly how our people treated their so-called quote-unquote servants. She was not a slave. You understand? She was getting paid, and she was housed. And like when you were a so-called servant to the white man, they were saying you were property, and you were not getting paid. You would probably live outside. In 1820, around the time she and her husband moved out, Jacob Abdallah, a native of Malta, moved in. He stayed about 3 years. He married an African American, Mary Downing, in 1823, but she died just 5 months later. And after William Wright died, Abdallah married Catherine Gillett in Notre Dame Church in 1826. Trim was a witness at William Wright's funeral, as he was at the baptisms, weddings, and funerals of many other black Montrealers. He was there, of course, at the burials of his old friend Henry Moore and his wife Margaret Plovier, who had shared the house of McGill Street. Moore had died there in 1803, supposedly at the age of 42. His wife was said to be 80 when she died in September 1827. Mary Ann Drummond from Jamaica was another in his circle. Trim and William Wright had stood witness at her wedding to Jacob Grant on August 8, 1815. The least that can be said about her is that she had staying power. She lost her husband, a waiter on the steamboats to Quebec, in 1841, but she lived another 35 years, never remarrying and with no children to help her out. A widow had to be pretty hardy and resourceful to go it alone in those days, when there were no government old age pensions and no social welfare benefits of any kind. For practical reasons, most widows didn't stay widowed too long. Mary Ann Drummond was definitely resourceful. In September 1829, it was she, not her husband, who bought their house and paid £150 for it in cash. It was a 2-story wooden house on St. Constant near Minion Street. The money probably came from her laundry business. After her husband's death, she survived by renting out one of the floors of her house. Jean-Francois, a cook from Haiti, was her tenant through the 1840s. Why don't they teach that in high school? Listen, black people were successful, and the only reason we're not successful is because white people prevent us from being successful today. Trim and the nigger were married on the following April 2nd. Yes, so like it. This is just fast forward. I had to skip a few of them, right? Why? Because I think Charlotte died at some point. For time's sake, I had to skip a few of them. Charlotte died at some point, and Trim had to remarry to a woman, to another woman. You understand? So maybe he had hopes that he'd have a son to carry on the Trim name. Why? Because he only had daughters with Charlotte. No such luck. They had 2 more children in the next 3 years, but both were girls. Henriette, born on May 8, 1827, and Charlotte on August 9, 1829. All the while, he kept buying up land in St. Antoine suburb. In July 1827, it was a house on Janvier Street, which is La Gauchetière today, between Mountain and Peel. That's he bought a house where we have camp. Yeah, he bought a house where we have camp. Imagine that. For which he paid 1,500 livres. At a sheriff's sale in February 1828, he picked up another lot that backed onto his Janvier Street property for £55. Then on September 2nd, 1829, for £275, he bought a property on St. Antoine Street, a big lot that included a house, stables, a shed, and a well. This man played Monopoly for the longest time during slavery. Mind you, slavery was ended in 1834. And he's still playing Monopoly from the time from 30 more years. Listen, 30 years before slavery ended, he was playing Monopoly. And he always played Monopoly. And he was not a greedy bastard. He let our people use his house because, you know, he housed our people. He was at the weddings, he was at the funerals, so on and so forth. You understand? Trim and his family didn't move to any of these new locations. Khan.
So, like, if I could interject right quick, right, priest?
Khan.
And what you're doing right now is so important because you showing exactly, you know what I'm saying, like how our people, you know what I'm saying, like was flourishing even right after slavery, you know what I'm saying. And this is one thing that we got to put in our mind as Black, Hispanics, and Native Indian. If they leave us alone, they don't put drug in our community. They don't push out, you know what I'm saying, like for you to be a whore, for us to be drug dealers, for us to, you know what I'm saying, to sleep with another man's wife. If they don't push sin on us and let us do what we got to do, you know what I'm saying, we will surpass white people, man. You know what I'm saying? If you think, you know what I'm saying, white people are the smartest, they're not smart. You know what I'm saying? And this is why, you know what I'm saying, like, they, you know what I'm saying, like, once they leave us alone, we flourish. And this is why, you know what I'm saying, like, the CIA had to put drugs in our neighborhood. This is why, you know what I'm saying, like, even if we come out and say, like, Black people are the real Jews, they don't want people to know. This is why they got to call the government and whatnot. You know what I'm saying? Like, if come in General YAHANNA, come in Canada. Why? Because if these people, they know if they leave us alone, and which is in the Bible too, if they leave us alone and we start doing, not only like doing what the Bible say, but having, you know what I'm saying, some type of money or some type of way to get, you know what I'm saying, wealth and to get, you know what I'm saying, like revenues and help our people, we will surpass white people in every aspect of this life. This is why they keep destroying you, and this is why they refuse for you to know who you are. So, like,
damn right. As a matter of fact, hey, listen, white people are lazy as hell. They don't want nothing. They want their kingdom to be built off of us, blood, sweat, and tears. You know, and even then, even him being left alone, they still couldn't leave him alone because I think it was the Clark family. They were building on his property. They're like, yo, he has so much land, it doesn't matter if we take some of it. White man's a devil. Good night. Yeah, we're about to finish. After this one, we're going to finish, not this slide, but the story of Trim. We'll do a part 3 next Sunday, yeah? So yeah, so he's buying more properties, and he's not even living in the properties that he's buying. He's just buying properties. That's how much money this man got. So Trim and his family didn't move to any of these new locations, but in the will he made out on December 7th, 1829, he ordered that the McGill Street house be sold at his death and that his family move to one of his houses in St. Antoine suburb. You know, fortunately, this is a problem in our community that we sell our properties as opposed to passing them down. And again, the brother was not in the truth, even though he did show a lot of brotherhood to our people. But really, it would have been better to pass down or to sell the property to another brother or sister or to pass it down, you understand, to our people so we could keep and build generational wealth. He asked to be buried at the old burying ground of this city alongside with his first wife, Charlotte. Why? Because she had died. That's why he remarried. Even though there was nothing wrong for him to marry another woman. So he has all the money. He has all the properties. He has all the freedom. Get all the wives. Just leave some for other brothers. That's it. It's a lucky. He named 3 white men as his executors. See, that's a problem because he did not have the truth. If he did, he would have known that you should never trust your oppressor, as his wickedness will rust as like iron. I'm just paraphrasing, right? Merchants Joseph Shutter, William Forsyth, and grocer Nicholas Peter Matthias Korzinski, or however you pronounce his name. Trim was not done yet. He dictated a new will in the fall of 1831, repeating his wish to be buried beside Charlotte, but dropping the requirement that his family move from McGill Street. Mistrusting his wife's ability to manage things, or perhaps that if his daughters married their husbands might squander their inheritance, he left all his properties to his lawfully begotten grandchildren. His daughters had only the usufruct, the interest on the revenues from the properties during their lifetimes. He didn't trust his new wife. He said, I don't know what she's going to do with the money. So, yeah, and I'm only passing down my properties to my lawfully begotten grandchildren. Not even to my children. I don't even trust them either. Salaki. In other words, his daughters could live in his houses, but the houses would belong to any legitimate children they might have. And if there were no grandchildren, the use of the properties was to go to two of his white connections. Good night. And at their death, the properties were to be sold, the proceeds going to the poor of Montreal. Trim again named three white executors, Forsyth, Corson, and the Connecticut-born merchant John DeWitt, who was a reformed member of the Assembly. Only Corson accepted. So we're building white generational wealth. And again, the brother was not in the truth. You understand? In addition to his will, on February 9th, 1832, he asked his three executors, along with my reverend friend John Bethune, rector of Christ Church, to act as guardians of his children. And he specifically said, I desire that my wife, Flavie the nigger, Salaki, shall have no control whatsoever over the property or person of either one or another of my said children. He made sure in his will his wife ain't getting nothing. He entrusted her with nothing. Not the money, not the properties, not the children. No, he must have loved her, I guess. He married her, you know. But for whatever reason, he didn't trust the woman. Hey, Lord be with him. Cutting her out of her administration of his estate was one thing. Denying her the right to raise her own kids seems outrageous. What you might expect from a crotchety old man, and that part of his will was ignored. But at least Trim had some arrangements for the disposal of his property instead of leaving everything up in the air. Wills, like marriage contracts, were not common among black Montrealers. One of the few to make out a will was the widow Mary Elizabeth Charles at Saint Philip de la Prairie across the St. Lawrence, who had done so far back as 1799. She also made out a new one in 1803 when she was living downriver at Saint-Sulpice. There was Pierre Bonga, the Northwest Company interpreter, who had dictated a will on a rare visit to town in 1815. He might have spared himself the trouble, where he died out in the field in what is now Minnesota. Let me see. Yeah, we can skip these. This is just to show that wills were not common in the black community back then, just like marriage contracts, right? Let me see. So he bought another house, whatever the case is. Again, his wife Flavie is not getting anything. You understand? So we get there. So Trim left three young daughters, three heiresses, and how valuable were the assets he left. When his McGill Street property, by then a vacant lot, was sold on January 8, 1850, to pay off a judgment against his estate, it went for £1,100, and that was only one of his properties. Mind you, he kept buying properties like he was playing Monopoly during slavery. Less than 5 months after his death, his young widow married widower Robert Moore. Trim's former lodger giving up her right to some mentioned in her marriage contract. Yes, Salaki, I forgot to put in this slide. So basically, he had a marriage contract with his wife after Charlotte, right? Flavie. The marriage contract was she gets this amount of money after my death if she doesn't remarry. So he died, she remarried, so the contract is void. She's not getting any money. I forgot to put that slide up, But that was the deal that he had with Flavie. Her name is crazy though. That's how you pronounce her name in English, Flavie the nigger. She would have got some money. She would have got after his death if she didn't remarry. She clearly didn't give a damn about the money. She remarried and she ain't get no money. So again, Trim's former lodger giving up her right to the sums mentioned in her marriage contract. And Trim's 3 girls grew up and we'll leave them to it. So we'll leave it at that for now. You understand? We'll do a part 3 next week. Right, that was the I.S.U.P.K. Montreal history class, Sunday history class. We'll be there every Sunday evening, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 7 to 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You understand? These are some of the people that you will never learn. You won't even hear about them. Listen, you can't just Google famous black people in Montreal. You probably will find what? Georges Larac, PK Subban, hockey players, right? Or criminals. That's it. If you're not in sports, you're a criminal, and that's how you're known in white society. They will never let you know about Cesar Joanot, who was one of the first, if not the first, manager of a business, one of the biggest business in Montreal during the height of slavery. You'll never hear about John Trim. I'm gonna call it the monopoly nigga. Yeah, you never hear about John Trim, the monopoly nigga. In the middle of slavery, buying property. This man damn near have more properties than white men in Montreal. Imagine that. You understand? You'll never hear about all these other brothers. What was the brother name again? The brother name was running a restaurant. And he got stabbed in the gut by white criminals. Who were these criminals? They were soldiers of the King's Regiment, supposed to be honorable, right? Fighting for your country, for your rights. Yet they're just petty criminals of the King's 8th Regiment. You'll never hear about the lamplighters, who are the reasons the watchmen were able to chase criminals who were committing crime around the city of Montreal downtown at night. They're the reasons these watchers are able to be the watchmen of the city. Why? Because they're providing light for them to see in the dark. You'll never hear about them. You'll never hear about how they had to work because white people were lazy. You understand? Now, remind you, next time I tell you lazy, let them know about the lamplighters. Next time I tell you black people can't run businesses, let them know about Cesar Joanot. Let them know about CJ, who they should have remembered, but at least making a whiskey named after him. They want to talk about Louis-Joseph Papineau and his father in Quebec, how they were great French Canadians, whatever the case is. Remind them that Joseph Papineau not only was a slave owner, but he fought to keep slavery alive. Remind them of that. Remind them when the next time you come to Montreal, you take the subway, you go to Papineau Station, or you take the bridge, the Papineau Bridge. Keep that in mind. You understand? Remind them of John Trim, a successful landscaper that had multiple properties, that had money, and he was paying cash for it. And just like Caesar, and unlike white people, John knew how to read and write, and he had his own signature. You understand? With that said, I'm going to get a security announcement to water for everyone who tuned in, to water for Officer Adia who joined me. We'll be back next Sunday, again, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The show about Montreal Black then, and we'll move on to the next one. You understand? So let me get a security announcements. We'll end the class right here. The water, Israel.
And don't forget, you know what I'm saying? The oppressor is the goddamn devil the Bible speak of, you know what I'm saying? L'oppresseur est le diable dont parle la Bible. Blanc maintenant c'est diable.
Damn right. This is the I.S.U.P.K. security announcements. We are the I.S.U.P.K. started at 1 West 125th Street, Harlem, New York, under Commander General YAHANNA. Rules for new brothers and sisters. When a new brother or sister comes into the school, they're off limits for 6 months. They're to be saluted only. They're here to shed themselves of the world. If they need transportation, the teacher will arrange it. After 6 months, if a brother or sister has an interest in a particular person, he or she must get permission from the head to speak to a brother or sister. There's another 6 months in which the brother and sister will court each other. After the 6 months period, the brother and sister will get permission from the head to marry. Tithes, which is a commandment. Numbers chapter 18, verse 21, and Malachi chapter 3, verse 8 to 10. Means 10th in the Hebrew, ma'ashara. 10% of every penny of any increase the Lord gives you. Give to the Treasury Department of Teacher. Priest Fund, free will offering for priests, not mandatory, whatsoever amount you like. Upcoming Holy Convocation, we have the Memorial of Blowing of Trumpets, which is the first day of the 7th month, which falls on Sunday, September 21st, 2025. You can read more about it in the book of Leviticus, chapter 23, verse 24 to 25. We're reminded to Alakim and Aquatim to check the bulletin board in the hallway of the schools that they have a physical location. And if any brother wants to be a trooper in the school, to start wearing all black, boots, shirt, kind of headband, and scarf. With that said, we'll give a courtesy salute to the brothers and a courtesy salute to the sisters. Menavision Imajim, which means to stand. We'll give a courtesy salute to the brothers. Menavision Imajim Shabbat. Imajim, Barak, Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai Brakatham. Mean Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai bless y'all. Yajim Matah, which means hands down. Sar, which means to turn. Turn and face the sisters. If you have any in your presence, we'll give them a courtesy salute as well. Menavision Imajim Shabbat. Imajim, Barak, Yahweh Shemar, Alatan Bahashem Yahweh Shai. Mean Yahweh watch over y'all in the name of Yahweh Shai. Yajim Matah, which means hands down, class dismissed.
Warning.
Say this from me heart on a rum chat. Here we contact, get your gunshot. Make the sun dark and the ground black. We plant calm but I never agriculture. I know the eagle in the younger the eagle when young people that are the vulture. Said them evil never the vulture. They could have run pan diesel that a fee punja. Away the blood clot. Do some gun back. Away the blood clot. Do some gun back. Easy we coulda squeegee inna the Honda. Sleepy gunshot beat him inna him slumber. Greedy fi make them dopey a the younger. Glad say me nah pre when me the younger. That no mean say no pussy can try. Pussy try run up and give with them life. Can't see penalty give with 3 points. This one West boy you must see one die. Away the blood clot. Do some gun back. Away the blood clot. Do some gun back. Don't stop war with we. You will see, you'll see. My dark them are real. Better agree. Don't stop war with we. You will see, you'll see. My dark them are real. Better agree.
Hey, listen, brothers and sisters, man. If you like what you hear, hit the subscribe button, man. Subscribe to this channel. And also, please, go to isupk.com and pay your tithe. Drop me some cash so we can move around this planet like we need to, man, and do the things we need.